Hey guys, welcome to this week's CanJS Community Hangout. Today we're going to have Andrew giving us a presentation on how to make 7-segment displays. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, using can.Component. And Andrew, do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself real fast?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Andrew Holloway. I've been working at Petovi starting this year, this is one of my first opportunities to kind of get in there and do some work with some can.Component. So hopefully I can show you guys some better or different examples.
Yeah, Andrew's a master at Canvas, but he's not actually done too much CanJS work.
You like long strolls on the beach, Andrew?
What was that?
You like long strolls on the beach?
Yeah, with a nice bit of literature with me, I think, just to watch the sunset. It's good times.
So I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to you, Andrew, but
Okay.
show us what you've learned. And this is going to be a great one, I think, for people that are just starting to get used to using CanJS and interested in how components work. So this should be a really great presentation for that.
Great. So yeah, I'll take over here so you can see what I got.
And make sure to share your screen.
Right on it. So can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay. Cool. So just to start, this is just a visual of what I've worked on. And what I've done here is used can.Component to mimic the display that you might see on an alarm clock or a microwave, that kind of thing. So I can walk through the code and kind of give you an idea of what's happening here, and then I can give some demonstrations of how you can use this. Give it just a moment. So what we have here is just the basics of a component that I'm using this tag for, LED display. And we also have a compute. This will store the actual value that you're seeing on this example here. So the compute has 2005 in it. There's one main event, and what it's currently tracking is the value of that compute. So when it changes, it will trigger all of the rendering that gives you this display in the back here. I can actually give a quick example of what that looks like just to show you that it's working. Now, in our code here, we have this variable set to global just so I can give this demonstration. And what I'll do is change the display value to 2001 in this case. And we can see that the screen updates there. I can also do things, change it to a smaller number.
Hey, Andrew, we had one or two requests for your font size to be up just a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
I can do that here and there as well. So just to show that that's doing what it does. And now I'll jump back to the code. So how does that actually work? Well, our compute, again, just is tracking the value that I'm typing here. So you can see it's just 201. So,
by the way, Mohammed says hello.
Oh,
in the questions app.
Hey, how's it going?
So I'll be paying attention to it, and if other people have questions, I'm watching it. So the questions are.
Yeah, please do let me know. So I have two things in the scope here. Now, power, it's a measure to show kind of the mimic like a faulty display. I don't know if this shows in the video or not, but if I were to set this to a larger number, let's say the most maximum number it can display, you'll notice that some of the parts flicker a bit, and that's just kind of to give it a more realistic feel. So changing this higher or lower just determines how much that flicker happens. This object contains an array of the segments to display for each number. So the number 1 should enable segments 3 and 6, which in this case are number 3 here and number 6 here. We also have a couple of characters just, well, we'll see what that looks like in a moment. But these two items map just the display value to the segments that it should show. So again, this event is just checking as the compute changes, and it triggers the change to display the number, and also to reset the flickering value, because the flicker is determined by how many segments are being displayed. So error here is just to keep track of when the number that you've requested to display is larger than the number of segments available. So if we put 10,000 in, we get a nice little error here, and we also just get, an error report in the console. And I'll just drop that back down to 1,000. Display number value is the first part that does that check, so we can see how many digits are available in the container. If the number we want to display is larger than that, it gives you the error state. Otherwise, it goes and loads the digits. Most of this will be pretty straightforward, but just to kind of walk through it, load digits resets the display, and then for each digit, it will take the value from the string and request that it be drawn onto the particular digit number. Load digit first enables or disables this sort of shadow above it, each digit, and then it will map out the different segments by their selector name, and then request that they be turned on. So it removes the class for turning them off, just turns them on. So a little bit of CSS manipulation there. Reset digit basically just turns the display off. So if I were to make this a shorter number, just in this case, this digit has been reset. So no highlighting, none of the segments are on, no flickering, everything's returned back to normal. Reset resets the entire display, just using resets digit on each digit. You also notice here I have a proxy because of just wanting to make sure that I'm using the right this in this case. And the last major part is just the function that controls how flickering works. So there are two types of flickering. Again, it can slightly darken the number or brighten it, and it's more or less determined randomly. And this changes some classes. So the first bit just picks either the light or dark flicker. And for each component in that number segment, it removes those and then resets it based on which one it was determined before. And the last bit is to reset that flicker. So it only happens for a random amount of time each time it flickers like that.
Hey, Andrew,
yeah, sure.
I know you said, like, we were talking offline before we started the broadcast, and
Sure.
you've done this before using just like jQuery and kind of traditional methods. What would you say you notice were like the biggest advantages of using can.Component for this versus how you had it set up before?
That's a good question. So to start, it was just to kind of wrap my mind around it. It did require a little bit of extra thinking just to make sure that everything was encapsulated. But I think that is the biggest advantage, is that when you want to add a new display, the way I have it set up right now, by adding something like this and using a can component, we're able to consolidate the logic and also reduce the amount of like functions that may or may not be in like global scope or the other attributes and values that are used. So it's all really self-contained, and it makes it easy to see where the value can be loaded in and give it a default value. So that made it, I think, easier to maintain as well.
And like I know, so we kind of mentioned this kind of like a getting to know like kind of CanComponents 101.
Mm-hmm.
So some things might be good to show us just kind of like how you're listening to that value change. Some things that are kind of unique to CanComponent.
Sure. So again, I have this compute value here, and what this is being used is just a number in my code here. In the stash template, what I'm doing is linking that compute here, and I'm just including it with the brackets there. It's the format for using that with stash. And when I append it, I just tell the template, hey, this value should actually be that compute that was used above. Now, before in the old code, I had like a jQuery bind call on an input, and I had to, if I needed to do any binding between anything else, other inputs on the page or data being returned from a server, I would have to remember to bind and unbind all of these different parts of the page to make sure that everything on the page was staying in sync. With using our can.Compute here and this can.Component, any changes that happen to this display value, if there are more components on the page that are also like cross-bound, then they all stay in sync. So all of the logic number changing actually can just go through changes to the compute that I've used.
Perfect. And then once again, kind of before we started the live broadcast, we were kind of all running through this, and and Justin, I think you mentioned a couple of improvements that you thought could be made, or different ways that can might be better. This might be better built using can.
Yeah, so I think this was a really good segue between like how you might use how you might have built something with a control, like a can control, converted into a can component, because it's mostly using the events object, and it's mostly manipulating the DOM like manually.
Yeah.
The issue with that is that, like, let's say you wanted to test your digit logic conversion, right? So you're basically, can you go up to the top where you have your like map of, you're saying that digit 1 should illuminate position 3 and 6.
Yeah.
Right. And what you really want to do is say, hey, given some number, these 4 digits should be illuminated. Oh, you just had a question. Mohammed asked, how are the digits displayed, CSS or SVG?
So the digits are displayed using CSS. And I can...
Yeah, let's show that right immediately after
yeah.
my field.
Yeah, okay.
So what I was going to say is, how would you test? How would you be able to test, like, hey, given the number, 1, 2, 3, 4, that I'm essentially going to be illuminating lights for digit 1, 3 and 6, for digit placement 2, 1, 3, 4, 5, 7. How can you easily test that? And the problem is, without a view model, you can't. This is a very natural way that people tend to build things, but a view model allows you to test the actual behavior without the DOM.
I got you.
To kind of explain how you might do that is, I always try to start with what a can you see my screen?
Let's see here. I can, and I think everyone else can too.
Okay, so what I might want to do is, in my template, have it automatically render I would have your HTML and CSS and stuff like that, but I would say, hey, if digits the first place, I'm starting actually from the left to the right, but you could number it, but basically maybe digits is an array where the first item in the array is your leftmost number,
Mm-hmm.
and then if that has a top property that's true, I'm going to do a dash for the top part. If it's a top left, I'm going to show this. Top right, I'm going to show this. In middle, I'm going to show this. And I'd keep going on for like a bottom left, bottom right, and bottom. Are you with me there?
Yes.
Okay, so what I might have is, well, ideally I could put all of this in a partial, and then digits 1 and 2, I would just have digits 1, and then I would have like digit.stash. And then as long as if digits 0 were to be empty, then this wouldn't show. And if digits, the first item in digits was available, it would show, and its top was truthy, it would just show up automatically. Right? The live binding would take care of updating everything.
Okay.
To build something like this, on your scope, you could have a digits function that might check if value is greater than 1999. You might have a helper, which is like make, set digit object, or something that you might call, and this would give like a number between 0 and 1, and this would return something like, you might use your own mapping, but somehow you were mapping, right? This might return top true, left top true, bottom left true, bottom true, and this is making a C right now. I would have to keep going on to right top true, right bottom true, and this would make it 0, right? So like I would do if 0, return this, or some type of object like or digits like you're creating, and this would call out to that. So this would do something like digits 0 is equal to set digit or make digit object num, or it would get the digit greater than, it's going to do this dot value, this dot actor value, whatever is it, divided by 1,000, and then, right, so it's going to pass that 1,000th place digit, and it's going to set the digits, set the digits first item to that thing, and then I would return this digits array. You kind of with me there? Hopefully other people are.
Yeah. So okay.
Each object is going to look like an array of like 4 items with things like, and then each place is going to have what things on your screen to light up, depending on the number. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then what you'd be able to do is I could invoke this view model and then set its I could do something like view model dot enter digits, value 1,000, and then what this would allow you to do is view model dot digits read it, and this would give you that array, and you could kind of more easily unit test. Oh, given 1,000, it should be a 1, so it should have bottom right, bottom, and top right as true. And then you just let the live binding take care of showing and hiding things.
Okay. Yeah, I can see the advantages. Yeah, for sure.
The advantage is mostly just testing. Doing it the way that you're doing it is totally a legitimate way of doing it. This just has advantages of testing. You kind of create given your source, you create that intermediary value.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, one of my concerns while I was working through this is, well, and just, I guess people can probably see the code I have again. But if not, anyway, one of my concerns was, how and where to put this numbers information. Before, it was just kind of a variable that was in the scope of the ready function in my old implementation. So I didn't want to do that, obviously, but at the same time, how could I tell that things were being, rendered properly? And, using a view model like that would be like a perfect way to get around that problem.
So those numbers, that mapping, I mean, a lot to me depends on how you want someone to be able to adjust. Do you want someone to be able to add easily what an A means?
Yeah, that was one thing I think it might be useful to have some default values, or to let people specify whether it should be numbers or different shapes, that kind of thing.
And what you're doing is essentially specifying a default, what your code was doing is specifying a default like instance of that mapping logic. You might make it global so that if someone can add an A, it adds it for everything, or you can make it so when you create the widget, you can pass it this whole object.
Sure. Yeah.
The rules. A lot depends on how you expect and if you want people to use it.
Right.
I would probably make something like that global. People probably don't need an A displayed as one thing in their application with this widget as a different, like lighting, different things lit up for an A in the same application. I think that's unlikely. I would make it like on the actual component itself, accessible statically somehow.
Now, I mean, some future ideas I had for this was, well, that was one thing, letting people be able to possibly determine how they wanted things to be displayed, but also, well, I don't think it's that useful, but at the same time, like if, let's say we had, what is it again? So this has just 7 segments, but, there are those displays that have the crosses in the middle between the top and bottom portion, so you can make more shapes. That gets a little bit more complicated, in terms of how to keep track of things. So,
Mohammed has a question
sure.
for me, and then we should answer his other one about CSS or SVG. Chris, I don't know if you have like access to the questions thing, but I cannot like indicate one is being answered. Chris,
I see a Q&A tab. I click it and I see questions. Okay.
But
I see a question. Yeah.
Normally you can mark them as being answered, so that like, well, anyways.
Yep.
So about the performance, so compared to what Andrew did, I think mine would be faster, mostly because I think Andrew is rewriting the whole DOM, whether a change happened or not. But I think maybe mine would too. I'd have to write mine with the define plugin to avoid that. Meaning, so like Andrew, if you can show your code, I think yours was running through and clearing all of the digits first and then kind of updating them. Is that? So
it checks over each digit and then it will reset some CSS on the existing DOM. So.
But it resets it whether it was changed or not. Right?
The one optimization here is like when it's resetting it only resets the ones that are on. So depending upon what the number was, it only does that.
So I would imagine that the performance of mine would be very comparable. Well, of course you can always have much better performance going straight to the DOM. But then you have to make sure that you're only updating what you need to. Which I don't know if this is yet. So I think the performance would probably be comparable. And also, I don't think the way that I was doing it with just a single compute that's going to be recreating digits every time, that actually would be redrawing everything. You would have to use the define plugin to do it right. To do it so that the live binding is only going to change what's the bare minimum.
Okay.
Sounds
good. Yeah, and just to follow up with that, I mean, so for my code here a bit, again, this is the one place where it does avoid some of the resetting by removing only the classes that it needs to. I mean, it has to look at this each time, obviously. So, and the only thing that does every single thing is when you call into reset and reset digit. So it's going to do this whether or not the that particular digit was on beforehand or not.
So you want to go through how you made those, how you styled the lights?
Yeah, sure. So the template is just all of the different parts and elements, and I'll just look at one of these. Each digit has this highlight, which is this part here above it, so it's kind of like a glow. Each segment has 3 parts. The middle part is the main portion of the segment. The top and bottom parts are actually little squares that have been rotated 45 degrees, so it gives it that angle. And then they have like shadows and stuff on there to give it that style. And each part is just has a particular class. Each digit has an ID, and all of this is just a unordered list with that class of display. So with this structure, we can get each segment. We're able to target the particular segments. We're able to whether or not that digit is on or not. And in our code, that's what this and that part are doing.
Did anybody notice I was just chewing on a print cartridge? Just mindlessly, I just took it out and I was like, thinking about his stuff. Now I've got ink all over my hands and probably my face. Anyway, sorry, Andrew.
I'm giving you the thumbs up right now.
Not too much on your face. You're all right.
Yeah.
You get all over my hands though.
That's
That's
probably not great.
Consider using. You probably could maybe use befores and afters, maybe too. So you wouldn't even have to have like 4 divs or 3 divs per like segment.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no. You're saying like for these first and last parts, or?
Yeah, you know the pseudo element tag where you
Yeah.
can like pull in before and you can kind of create an element with arbitrary content and.
Mm-hmm.
You might have been able to use that. I wonder if that works. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it would be. Yeah, I would have to play around with it. But that's an interesting idea because I would prefer this not to have as much in there. And like you were demonstrating, if I had like templates for each digit, then I could avoid a lot of this like repetition through here. So if nothing else, yeah.
One thing, so Bitobi has our basketball tournament, right? And here's the scoreboard I use that to manage the games that I make everybody learn how to use. I definitely want to change this now to use your 7-digit display to make it even cooler.
That's a very interesting segue because what I can do is, if you give me a second here, let me set this guy up to.
Count.
Yeah, I'm gonna do one of these things.
So somebody mentioned that they'd like to see your 7-segment display after kind of some of Justin's recommendations have been put into it, and just so we can see what that final outcome looked like.
Oh yeah, I think that'd be great.
I know you're busy next week, I think, right?
He's on vacation.
There you go. So maybe the week after we'll have you back on just to run through really fast and show the changes.
I use the sound tag or whatever the audio tag for this. Whoa!
So of course, there will be some additional logic.
I don't hear anything. You hear anything?
Clear. Let me just stop that.
Oh, you got to count. Yeah, it's cool. Countdown.
It would need to, like do date time logic for the digits and changing, but yeah.
Awesome.
Cool, you guys.
We can merge in one project.
Yes. So I mean, with those improvements that you mentioned, also, we can get something that's structured a little bit better and looks good.
Awesome. It would just be cool to see the two different ways too.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. I'm going to call it a hangout unless anybody has anything to add. Next week, Jan is going to be teaching us kind of how to help ourselves. There's a lot of new community efforts being put forward for CanJS and more documentation, etc. So Jan's going to teach everybody kind of where to find that and like I said, how to help themselves. So awesome. I'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in today, and have a great one.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, thanks, guys. Thank you.
All right, bye.